You're good to go.
Okie doke. Thanks everybody for zooming in on this Tuesday afternoon. Jane has sent out an agenda with a couple of policies, and thanks to everybody that were actually able to review those either via a team or I know the high school admin reviewed one of those for us. Mike, do you want to start with any one in particular, or just roll?
No, I don't have any in particular. So I see that there's 3 to discuss and review today. Policy 0061, 246, and 204.1. I did send out, so Jane sent out the agenda to the greater group. And in terms of policy 006.1, it was basically sent back to committee at our last board meeting. Kathleen wanted to discuss some language and some different things. I don't think that we felt that the policy was 100% in terms of the communication that we were looking for. And I had a phone conversation with her last week, and I reached out to PSBA policy chairperson, and they have an updated version of 006.1 that they took and updated pretty much due to the COVID-19 pandemic, just to add some specific language in there in terms of like a emergency or extraordinary type scenario. So I sent out a copy yesterday of that policy, and I think hopefully everyone has a copy of that. So I just wanted to discuss that one. Maybe that is one that we could use to replace, because I think that we were kind of looking for a language change in 006.1, and just wanted to discuss maybe we could kind of go with that version, or if there's anything in there that made sense for us. And then I think the rest of the things on the agenda we can just discuss as normal.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mike, thank you for finding that PSBA version. I really like the emergency conditions language that's in there. I think that will negate us having to make a motion to, what's the terminology? To
suspend.
Thank you. To suspend.
You got it.
Yeah, so I think that makes sense moving forward. I also like how the PSBA version gives in the authority section the inclusion of, quote, other necessary participants to have the opportunity to also join electronically. I think that makes sense. I will tell all of you, it just never sat right with me all of the times that I've been on the board, that we have interviewed applicants for vacant board seats and allowed applicants to telephone in their interview. That never quite sat right with me, because I always felt like that may have smelled a little bit like potential favoritism, which it wasn't, but I didn't like that. So I like that language about other necessary participants. But just to kind of, to share with all of you the concern that I brought forward to Mike, the reason why I wasn't ready for this to go to the board for voting. The section in here that's in guidelines. So under guidelines, if you take a look, there's a sentence in there that says a majority of board members, quorum, shall be physically present in a board meeting in order for a board member to attend via electronic communications. So as I reflected on that, what I thought was this, that I know from being in discussions with the board, the previous board, and some members on the current board, that what we don't want to do is have the majority of board members calling into a meeting. We really want to encourage board members to be present physically when they're able to be. So that particular sentence then really is something that's reactionary. It's not proactive, which led to really kind of today's discussion, but I'm actually pretty excited about the additional PSBA language.
So, so Kathleen, so that the policy that Mike sent out from PSBA, you'd be comfortable with that policy replacing the one that we have?
I'm really comfortable with that policy, although it still kind of locks us into that reactionary language when it comes to having to have a certain number of board members present in the space. And I wonder, do we want to replace that? And maybe we don't, but do we want to replace that with something like, to assure a majority of board members are physically present a maximum of, and we can decide the number, board members will be granted permission to attend electronically. And honestly, I'm not sure. And I was curious to know what you all think. Do we want to give a limit to the number of board members that the president can give authority to attend electronically?
I think we just need to keep in mind our capabilities. If, we obviously have had quite a few issues using Zoom. And, once again, I'll reiterate that our boardroom isn't really set up for, and we found out now auditorium consequently as well is not set up, for mass amount of people to zoom in or call in or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, obviously I'm not a board member. My only experiences are with the boards that I've worked with that have had this policy in place. Last district, it was only one person was able to call in per meeting, just in terms of managing the technology end of it, the conference call piece of it. So they had a maximum of one person could do it per meeting, and they kept the piece where then a majority of the board had to be physically present.
I love that idea, just putting that out there.
And I think if you read the PSBA 0061 Volume 2 2020, I think the way that it reads, and I'm not an attorney, but I think that it under normal circumstances, it encourages everyone to be present as necessary and as needed, but the language in there does allow for factors beyond our control or emergency situations or emergency orders like a pandemic, where if one or multiple people, whether it be our finance director or an applicant for a vacant position or whoever, if they needed to participate electronically, we have those provisions in this policy, the way it's written, to do so without having to suspend it. I didn't see anything in there that scared me in terms of someone abusing the policy or just kind of trying to phone it in. I just don't feel like making it in tonight. I could be wrong, but I read it a few times. I felt like it was pretty well written in terms of covering those circumstances, especially with the legal references and the other references it makes to the PA school code and just different things.
Yeah, Mike, I would agree with that, particularly because it requires the board member to request permission from the president 3 days in advance. So I agree that I don't think we'll have a problem with board members, misusing this policy. I think most of us really prefer to be together, as we've learned in these last couple of months.
Yep.
We like that better. So I think the sticking point for me, though, continues to be the statement in the PSBA version that says that a majority of school directors shall be physically present. And yet, listening to Andrew and listening to Jason, it may make sense for us to be more explicit and limit the number of board members that can, in fact, receive permission to join electronically. So what are some of your thoughts?
Let's go back. As a board member, I don't know how I feel about it, and I'll tell you why, because I'm living a real world example. Like this morning I woke up and everything was okay. And I have a wife with a broken arm, and I had to take her to the emergency room. And I also have a son that at the same time, simultaneously with my wife not being able to drive, I had to take to Gettysburg Pediatrics because he's covered from head to toe in poison ivy and needs prednisone. So stuff does come up last minute. And if, let's say, for example, if we limited the number to 2, and we had 2 board members, like with Kenny, he was scheduled to be out of town on vacation, booked his trip a year in advance. And if there was already, if we set the number to 2 and there was 2 people that had already requested permission ahead of time, and then something happened where I wasn't able to physically attend, but I could dial in via Zoom, I would feel at a disadvantage not being able to attend, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And then in that situation, this policy is not helpful because the policy does require that 3-day advance notice. So is that something we want to discuss? Should there be a
Right.
requirement of getting permission 3 days or more in advance? You know what, Mike? I mean, you bring up a really good point. I think in my own life, if there's going to be an extraordinary circumstance that prevents me from coming to the meeting, it's probably going to happen the day of. Probably, you know,
Right.
it's not, I mean, if I know I'm going to be out of town for work or whatever, that's something that, you know, that I know far enough in advance, and I'll work something out if I can. But this policy is really speaks to extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
And you know, I have a suggestion, because maybe the language in there about emergency situations is helpful in the sense that maybe we could throw some wording in there that, and again, I'm not the best with, you know, wordsmithing, but if you could basically say, under normal circumstances, no more than 2 board members, or whatever the number we determine, can get pre-authorization 3 days in advance, but also still have that emergency clause where if something crazy happens, let's say if 2 board members have already worked it out or whatever, that they're going to be dialing it in because of whatever circumstances they got the 3-day approval, but like my kid breaks his arm or something happens the day of, that we're covered under that emergency situation, or if there's a pandemic, we're all covered under that emergency situation, and that we don't have to worry about suspending the policy to make an exception. I don't know if we could word it that way.
Yeah, you know, Mike, I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. So, and Jason, I would leave this, of course, to your expertise to decide how this really could read, but maybe it is 2. So we'll go with 2. So a maximum of 2 board members may receive advance permission to join electronically. And it's at the president's discretion to allow additional board members to join electronically, you know, in late coming emergency situations, which doesn't sound right at all. If any of you are English faculty, I apologize. But anyway,
Same here.
but I think that makes a lot of sense to me then.
Right. I was going to say, in the past, when a board director couldn't attend last minute, then the unfortunate thing is that they just didn't show. So now that you have the electronic capability of doing that, you would want to, I know it's a fine balance of trying to encourage them to still attend electronically, but finding that balance of not letting them abuse that. So I would think that you would want to have those other members there with you. And exactly how you had said, Kathleen, it sounds like having those 2 different kind of provisions would still encourage people to come, but still give them the opportunity to still meet with you virtually. So,
And again, we need to keep in mind the technology limitations. I'm not sure if you're going to call out 20 minutes before a meeting. Like, I don't know that we're going to be able to, you know, at that point, if we have 3 or 4 people out, I can tell you we're not going to be able to just set a phone up near a microphone, you know, with the feedback. So then everyone's going to have to Zoom in. So then we're going to have to revert back to what we've been doing with Zoom. And then we're going to have to get all board members to bring in their laptops, all admin to bring in their laptops. Everyone have to have headphones. So I think, you know, I don't know that that necessarily is going to work either. I think that's why the 3-day provision was in there. Because as Sean said, if, you know, something happens last minute, you know, in the past, they just typically haven't come, which I understand, you know, if you're voting on something important, you know, like the budget, or, you know, you want to run for board president or whatever, you know, like that's important to be there. But I'm just looking out for myself, because I know that I'm going to be the one probably having to help set all that up, and along with the tech folks. And I just, you know, once again, I feel like we're pretty limited in our abilities to pull that off.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think. Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I just wanted to share quick. So if we're fast forwarding out of this pandemic situation where most of us are forced to be remote, and we're back to a situation where we're in the boardroom. I do know that the school has, I think you guys have voice over IP or Cisco phones. And they do, even with a normal speakerphone, you could in theory put a speakerphone or get a conference, like a Cisco conference phone, which might be an additional purchase of a few $100, but you could literally put that between Al and Kenny where the president sat, and you could have everyone in the boardroom being able to conduct themselves over their audio and their microphone, and have up to multiple participants dial a single 800 number. They would all be conferenced through that conference phone. We conduct several meetings on a regular basis, like where we'll be in a conference room at a customer site, and we'll have 12 people in the room, and we'll have, you know, up to a dozen people calling in, and you can effectively hear everyone and communicate. Those Cisco conference phones have multi-directional microphones and pretty robust speakers that typically don't feedback through other audio devices. That is an option, and that is how it's done a lot. So if the situation we're in right now might be tricky, but when the majority of us are all back in the boardroom and we only have one or two people out of band, so to speak, it's definitely doable. If we fast forward, or if we rewind back to the reorganization meeting where Kenny was in Cancun, we could all hear Kenny pretty well. He could hear us, and just think if there was two other people that were on that bridge, they would still be able to hear and speak as effectively as Kenny did. So just we keep in mind that it's not an impossible technical limitation. I think it's something that's pretty easily we could manage. Right now we're in a very unique situation where we're having multiple people through Zooms on headphones in the same room, and that is a feedback and audio nightmare, as we all know.
Yeah, this is a policy that I really would defer to the board on. So whether you want to take a version of this to the board and have folks discuss, you know, I'm kind of deferring to the two board members that are on Zoom, being that like this policy is really specifically kind of about the board. So like I'll obviously defer to what you all think makes sense.
Yeah, you know, one thing I think is really important is that any subcommittee is in agreement on, well, we'll just say our subcommittee, that we're in agreement on the language in a policy before it goes to the board, even for the first read. I think because as a board member, for instance, Finance, Buildings and Grounds, I look to my colleagues who are on that committee to bring to me what their due diligence, good faith recommendation is. And I consider that and go from there, of course, with questions and my ultimate decision. But I think that our board colleagues look for the same from this committee. So I don't know that the board wants to replicate what this committee does. I think they're looking for our recommendation based on the due diligence that we have done. And then the board can decide what it wants to do moving forward. So I am most comfortable with this group of people deciding what do we want this language to be. And then we recommend that to the board. So Mike, to that end, I really like this PSBA language a lot. I just do think that we need to change the language in that one sentence I keep referring to. And I think it sounds like we're all in agreement on changing that language, unless I'm misunderstanding the Zoom room.
I would agree. In terms of, I like the way that this particular policy is written by PSBA with the emergency language in there. But if we could clarify, and I would leave this to Jason and his staff, you know, if we could just clarify a sentence where it says, you know, basically under normal circumstances, up to 2 board members, if that's the number that we think is appropriate, up to 2 board members could request advance notice to be remote, and any like last minute emergent situations would be at the board president's discretion. I'm comfortable with that.
So that would go under guidelines after the sentence about a majority of school directors?
Actually, Jason, I would recommend that we delete that statement about a majority of school directors. Well, wait a minute. So we definitely want a majority of school directors to be there. I think that particular statement just needs to be revised. So we can keep the language about a majority of school directors being required, but here's how we get there, right? That no more than 2 board members will receive advanced, I keep saying permission. I don't really like that word, but anyway, you know, advanced permission to join remotely. And then at the president's discretion, additional board members may receive emergency permission. Mike, the way you said it actually sounded really good. Did you happen to write it down as you were saying it?
No, I didn't. No, I did not. I forget what I said too.
We're recorded, so that'll be helpful.
Yeah.
Because there's in bold up top, there's a sentence that says the board president may permit other necessary participants to participate in meetings via electronic communications as the board president deems appropriate. Just looking for the right place to plug it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like Jane and I can add it before Monday. Do you all want this to go back to information as a first read or to action as a second read?
If it goes through as information as a first read and everyone is in agreement, we could vote on it then, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to go to us.
Yeah,
I think it's fine to do that then.
Someone can make a motion to move it to action and you could vote on it.
Okay, because yeah, we're not going to have. There's really no more scheduled policy meetings for that until we resume school. So yeah, we could do that. We could put it through as a first read, and I'll send an email and encourage everyone to review it, and then maybe we can make a motion to
move it to action. Yeah, you can do
that to adopt it.
Okay. All right. So Jane and I'll just plug in language kind of at the bottom of under where it says a majority of school directors. We'll put something in there about in most circumstances only 2, under an emergency circumstances up to 3. Is that what I was hearing?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Emergency conditions. I'm just reading something, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
There's actually in the policy that says the board authorizes the administration to provide the equipment and facilities required to implement the procedure. So whatever we need to upgrade in order to do it, we can do it.
Yep, I really think, and like 100%, because I've been in a lot of conference rooms, larger rooms to facilitate mass gatherings. There's Polycom or Cisco. It's literally called a conference phone, and it's a triangle shaped phone that has a large speaker and it has omnidirectional microphones, and there's actually 2 little mics that come off on wires, and one could sit over on like Kathleen's side and the other could sit over on Amy Beth's side, and it literally has full microphone coverage for everyone on the board that would speak, and the speaker is very robust. I've been in some pretty large conference rooms, and they work really well, and you could have as many people dial into the phone number as needed, and it's just like they're all on the same line.
All right. So that we could definitely take a look at doing what we need to do to make that happen. Jane, so I would take the policy from PSBA that Mike emailed out yesterday after your email, and then I'll touch base with you tomorrow on adding some language, and we'll put it on the agenda as information, and the board can choose to move it to action that night.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else on 006?
I didn't have anything else.
Okay. 204.1 credit denial was from a couple meetings back. A board member asked if administration could review it, recommend any changes and bring it to committee. I know that Jeremy and Christy and Michael reviewed that, and so I guess in the document that went out, Christy, I'm assuming the red language was the change language.
Yeah, I had it blue, but apparently it's now, but yes.
Okay.
Scary.
Does the policy, did the policy still match your practice to a good degree, or
The old policy did not really match what we've been doing the last few years. And I'm kind of glad this came up to be changed, because when attendance policies changed in the last 2 years with creating the school attendance improvement plans and conferences that are now required, we had never really edited this policy to reflect what we were doing to address those things. So, so we edited this with those ideas in mind. In the past, the policy was if you were put on credits now, you know, at the end of the year, you could just write a letter to the principal saying, you know, oh, woe is me, I'm so sorry, please, you know, grant me, you know, my credits back. Where now we have students, we meet with them earlier and talk about an improvement plan where we are meeting with parents, the kids, could be teachers, counselors, could be community like Adams County Children and Youth Services, to create a plan to best help that family improve the student's attendance. So we put in here what we've been doing and what we'd like to continue to do. So I think this is a much cleaner version.
okay?
And
Your team's cool with this version then?
our team? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Any questions about that document for Christy or Mike?
Yeah, hi, Jason. I do. First, Christy, I want to tell you how much I really like that improvement plan. I so appreciate the earlier intervention, and I just think that's wonderful. Trying to just keep kids coming to school and going to class. I thank you for that. I do have a question. In guideline section A, students have 3 days to bring in their absent or tardy note. Is that 3 school days, 3 calendar days?
Three school days. So if they missed, you know, Monday, they'd have Tuesday, Wednesday. They should bring it in Thursday if they haven't brought it in by then. It just gives them a little leeway. Not to say that we don't also accept them a week or 2 later. You know, we can do that periodically as well. But as policy is something, you know, as a rule of thumb, kind of our guide, the 3 days is what the court, what the state everyone has recommended.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I have is this, and Jason, and you would know the answer to this probably pretty quickly, but throughout the document, there are a couple of places where we indicate that families will be communicated to electronically. And then there's a form, I think it's the acknowledgement of receipt of the student handbook. That's an electronic acceptance, right, that the family gives. So are we comfortable that all of our families have access to a computer and the internet at home for the parents first to receive? It's in guideline C. I think that's the first letter of concern, and it may be sent electronically. Do we have confidence? I mean, do all of our families have computers and the internet? And where I'm really going with this is, because Christy, I mean it, I love this early intervention, and I just don't want to see any student miss out on it because their parents won't receive an email notification.
Yeah, I can answer a couple of these things, Jason.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know that at the beginning of the year, families were invited in, and I know I think we changed to this, last year maybe, where families did these forms online rather than, I don't know if you remember, kids coming home with piles of papers on the first day. And basically to eliminate that and in our more electronic world to be able to sign those things and acknowledge them. So that's where this past year and the year before, we've had parents do that at the high school. And then we did have computers available for them, like on parent nights and things like that, that they could come in on back to school night and sign those papers if they couldn't before. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not perfect, but I think that's the way we're moving. The other thing, the other part of your question was, should some of that notification be electronic? We do, and it's hard to, it's hard to speak for those other schools, the middle school and the elementaries, but, we are moving more electronic in all of our communication. So if you look through this, you'll see the first one is, okay, 3 days, you might get an email. But at 5 days, you're getting a letter in the mail. Plus, it says that we're going to schedule a conference with you. So in that letter that parents receive, it asks them to call and set up a meeting. But if we don't hear from them in about a week, we call and initiate and try to set up that meeting, because you have to have that conference. And have recorded that you have tried to contact the parents in multiple ways. So therefore, that gives us email, that gives us United States Postal Service, and it also gives us telephone. So that's where that came from.
So if a family doesn't have access to a computer or internet at home, and they won't get the email notification if the students miss 3 days, they will definitely get the letter, because that is mailed at the 5-day. Is that when I?
Correct.
Well, but we also have, if they don't have an email, we are usually aware of that. So we wouldn't be sending an email if they don't have an email, because it's not in our system.
Jason, do we have families, and you I guess you wouldn't really know off the top of your head, but do we have families that don't have email?
And there are probably a small percentage that don't have email, but as Christy mentioned, like the buildings, people have access to the student records, can see that. So a lot of times that's where the counselors are reaching out by phone with the first step instead of waiting to the second or third step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other?
Well, I like that we have, computers available for parents who come in for the parent night.
Yeah.
Although I do think about, though, our parents who may not have cars, and maybe they don't even come to parent night. And I do hope in their homes that they're able to connect electronically, since the school, and I understand, Christy, of course, we're all moving in that direction.
Sure.
But I just, I think about every family, and I just don't want to see any family fall through the cracks.
I believe we have sent paper copies home if people have requested them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the district does a pretty good job too of when folks have those unique situations. We figure out a way to accommodate everybody's unique situation. I will say this district, more than any other that I've worked for, kind of goes out of their way to make sure that they're getting the families what they need with regards to whether it's communication, transport. Like, everybody's pretty keenly aware of who the families are that require it. I would say they're aware of it by building, and they're able to kind of support that. So that's kind of a testament to kind of the counseling staff, the administrators and nurses, and everybody that's kind of working, teachers, just everybody that's kind of working with those kids. They become really aware of their story, almost in a way. That's why the relationship piece is always so important.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions about the policy that the high school team reviewed?
Just a quick question about, is the changes to all of the additions of the tardies, is that also reflected in the attendance policy as well? I'm assuming the tardies are put in there because you are initiating this process because of the tardies as well.
It's about credit denial. So we've been in here. It does talk about credit denial. I think is that F? It's for a single class.
Okay.
So, we talked about not just missing a single class, but what about the kid who is always late for that class, like half hour late? So you get to that point where even if it is 10 minutes late, 5 minutes late, if you've been 5 minutes late to the class 20 times, that's excessive and you've really missed out a lot on the class. So that's why we've put that in there. And again, it's all discretion and it says may. I mean, that's the key word in a lot of this at the very beginning,
Sure.
may be put on credit denial.
Yeah.
Because the idea is there is, hey, maybe this kid has 7 to 10 lates to first mod and they walked in 2 minutes late each time. Well, then that hopefully would be at a attendance improvement conference where we meet with that individual, the parent, and the counselor, and they might just say, oh, but we run late all the time. Okay, well, we need to work on a plan and put some supports in place so that you're not running late all the time, because we don't want to see you go down this road.
Right.
And hopefully the idea there is you'd start seeing some improvement so that that student would have to be put on credit denial.
So I have a question. This is Mike. And I know this is probably a more rare circumstance than not. But let's say you have a kid. Let's say it's first period. He's not driving. His parents drive him to school every day, whatever. Let's say that literally every day of the third term, he's 3 to 5 minutes late for the class. But what if he has a 4.0? I know it's a disruption, but what if he has a 4.0, 100% in the class, exceptional student? How can you take credit away and affect his GPA if it might not be entirely his fault? And there has to be other methods of discipline and behavioral change techniques. Then because I'm just not a big fan of, if somebody earns a grade, regardless of what they do, I don't think that you should be able to touch that. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, we don't, I guess, to argue that point a little bit, necessarily get rid of their grade's still there. And part of the improvement plan would be to, we're trying to promote those college career standards. And a lot of that is, showing up on time, paying your bills on time, being present when you're supposed to be somewhere. So that is one of the things, we work on. In fact, we added that sentence in the top there. In preparing students for future employment, it's necessary to promote the positive habits of attending regularly and arriving on time, as these habits correlate positively with the workplace morale and productivity. And again, Mike, I guess, it's a may conversation. They may be put on credit to now. It doesn't mean they're going to be put on credit to now. We would hope that, there'd be efforts made to improve attendance.
And not to hold that against the child, but if the student does improve the attendance at all, or we have that meeting and we find out there's some extenuating circumstances, those grades are revised accordingly. So the CD that would be noted in the report card or in the permanent record turns back into the number on the score that the student earned in the class. So they do get credit for it when they complete the plan, or we get in touch with the parent if it's the scenario we're talking about, and we come to terms with it and figure out what's going on and try and make a plan to improve that. So we don't hold it from them forever. They do have a means to get them back.
Okay. Because I'm a stickler about being on time and accountability, and they're at that age where they have to start developing that work ethic so they can function as adults. But so I guess part of it is that I think there are some circumstances that may be outside of the child's control, and there's also, I believe, other ways to discipline or encourage and change that behavior versus taking credit away, especially if the credit was earned. Like, that's just my whole thing. Like, if even if they were late, but if they were exceptional students and made sure that that they had the grade, like I don't know. It makes sense what you're saying though. If remediation plan is taken into effect and there's an effort made, then they get the credit back. That's a different story. So that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of it goes back to that relationship piece too,
Yep. Okay. That was the only question I had.
All right. Thanks, Mike and Christy for jumping on today and walking us through that. Jane, that would be under information first read.
Okay.
And Jason, will we be putting this in our policy format? before it goes to the board?
Yeah, Jane will work on that. The format that we got was just because the high school team was reviewing it. They're probably putting it, it's probably going back and forth between like a Google Doc or something and in a Word doc.
Yeah, we took the policy the way it was and copied it and pasted it. That's all. So.
Yeah.
So Kathleen, I thought you wanted to see all these changes. You want those to be seen.
Yes, yes, Jane, thank you so much for doing
okay.
that.
So,
no, I was thinking about just, just the header, how
oh,
the-
yeah. Yes. I'll have that all there, but you do want to still see the tracking changes. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, I appreciate that too. It makes it so much easier to see what's being modified.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Thank you. And then the 246, both Sandy and Jeanette were working on that with, you guys had a fairly sizable group of folks kind of work on that through multiple meetings, correct?
Yes, we did. We had an extensive committee.
And you all revised, the attachments were the policy and the administrative guidelines, correct?
Correct. We might have butchered it a little. Sorry, Jane. So basically what we did, kind of we had redone the policy years ago, and it's quite lengthy for all of our policies. This is probably one of our longest, I think. But it's pretty extensive what PSBA had put out. But I think what we found was it was very confusing. It was almost so wordy. I think when we went through it with our committee, there were a lot of questions, and we really needed to kind of make it more simplified, easier to be read, therefore easier to communicate to our staff and students. So we pulled out the administrative guidelines piece of the policy, which is why you see so much crossed out, and put that into the administrative guidelines. So that's why you see so much taken out. We removed it from policy and put it in the guideline.
Right.
And just kind of simplified the wording. There was a lot of detail under each section, which kind of a lot of our committee members questioned. There were, it was very specific, like percentages of things, and we felt like it could be a little bit more broad, so we weren't held to these specific standards while still meeting the standards we needed to, but without being so specific.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if Sandy, you want to speak. I know one big issue we've had was with fundraisers, with classroom parties. And I think that's where we'll probably meet some resistance from staff. I think during our committee, that's where we got the most feedback. I think this presents a unique challenge because of COVID, and might help us in this right now by limiting what's being coming into our schools. So
Sure.
that kind of supports this change right now. And again, that's why we put in the administrative guidelines. If we look into the future, if situations change, then at least it's in the guidelines piece that allows a little bit more
Gotcha.
flexibility to change down the road.
We've also developed a list of a birthday basket that if there's classroom celebrations, they can order from the food service department. We'll have an order form on the website, or we can send it home if parents are interested in purchasing a birthday basket for a celebration rather than have food come from home.
Gotcha.
That's good to know, because I have to tell you, the one thing I thought that I will hear from parents on as a board member is, what do you mean I can't bring cupcakes in for, Lucy's birthday? So I'm happy to hear about the birthday basket. I think parents will be happy to hear about that too.
Well, we started out with first saying that all the cupcakes and food and stuff had to be purchased individually wrapped with nutritional analysis on. And then when the COVID thing came up, we decided that it was probably a good idea that nothing came from home. So that's when we developed the birthday basket or the classroom celebration basket that they could order from food services. And then, of course, we would know if there's allergies in the classroom that we're dealing with. So we would make sure that the snacks did not contain any of the allergens that are in the classroom.
Essentially, we've had a wellness policy in place that we really haven't been following. So hoping that with Andrew's help and once this moves forward, that communication gets out to our staff and students and families a little bit better to make this a little bit more manageable, doable.
And that was going to be my only question about is then how is this communicated out? Because some of these things obviously are some changes. Some of the things, as you had said, Jeanette, I mean, there's many things that I remember when we went through the first round of the first policy, and it seems like we've kind of gotten pretty lax through the years about following it. So this is a re-education that will need to take place with all the staff. So
For sure. I mean, and that's for our committee, I made sure that every building had a representative because I felt like they'll be able to, someone involved in the process that can bring it back to their school, can kind of answer questions. So that was why it was important to have at least every building represented.
Yeah, and we can build a communications plan around this. And obviously this is one of those, big policies that we would want to push out, not only to staff, but to parents as well. And then, and part of that communications plan could also detail whether it's something we need to review on a yearly or semi-yearly basis or something like that. So we don't run into a situation again where things become pretty lax and we're back to ice cream and cookies and cupcakes every other day. So, yeah.
Right. And I know Nancy has been cracking down at the middle school, really making efforts to kind of curb rewarding with food and whatnot, and doing more exercise rewards. And I've certainly pulled up, it's going to be about supporting teachers and coming up with alternative rewards. There's certainly many things out there. We're not the first district to be doing this. I mean, this is kind of that nutrition standards. So the research is out there and I have many documents. So I'm sure there's ways with Andrew, we can help communicate and share those resources.
Shelley,
it's a difficult
town. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's always I think that every district I've taught in or have been in has had this conversation. The pendulum kind of you put policy in place over the years. It kind of it'll get lax and you tighten it up over the years. It's just one of those things that you just have to kind of keep on top of, but that's not the first time that I've been where districts having this conversation and having to have it again as the policy is revised. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to involve a large group of people and make those edits. I appreciate it.
Sure, and we expect resistance. Of course, there's going to be resistance, but I mean, we made a school nut-free years ago when the resistance we got, but they've powered through, and you don't hear it anymore. So, I think we'll get through this too.
I just wanted to let everybody know that our first triennial assessment was due June 30th, 2020, but with COVID, they extended that we could apply for a waiver to extend that to next June 30th, 2021. So I did apply for the waiver because I thought now that we reestablished our wellness committee and we have a new policy, and with the COVID and not being in school for several months, I just thought it would be a good idea to apply for the waiver. and do a good job on our assessment for next June 2021.
Thanks, Sandy.
Now, the only other piece we did, because it mentions fundraising in this policy, the fundraising policy itself is, I think it's guidelines perhaps. I think it's from like 1987. So we did kind of redo those, and we can pass those along as a suggestion. Obviously, that's outside our scope, but because food fundraising is a big thing, we did kind of amend those, at least with the nutrition piece.
Yeah, and if they're an AG, that's pretty simple because that would just go as information and wouldn't be voted on by the board. So we could put those into practice just to match what you guys are trying to do. That's pretty easy.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and actually, Jeanette, that was really my only other question was which policies tie back into this AG?
Yes, it should be fundraising. I have it listed. I think there were food allergies, life-threatening food allergies, food allergy management. I did have them listed on the original. Let me look. We discussed one, I had discussed with Andrew at one point and asked if there was any policy on promotional information. Remember we discussed that, Andrew?
Yeah.
And I think it did talk about distributing information to community members. And so we talked about peach jar and whatnot, about physical activities. But we did not have any policy regarding that. Let's see. So we talked about fundraising in AG, food allergy management, food service, 808. That looks like at least those three.
So do you feel that the food allergy management policy and food service policy need to be revisited based upon the updates in this AG?
No, the food allergy management, the nurses updated 1 or 2, just not too long ago, within the last 2 years. So this does fall within those lines. And food services, Sandy, I think you might be able to speak to that, but I think that directly was talking about the nutrition promotion and education pieces.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anything else on the items that we discussed today? So Jane, just to recap, the 204, the credit would be an information item, next board meeting, first read, and then the policy that Jeanette and Sandy did, they would both be on as information, but only the policy would move to a second read, down the road. And then 006.1, we would put on information as well. And Mike will take care of having someone possibly move it to action. And I'll touch base with you tomorrow on adding that language that we discussed at the front end of the meeting.
Okay.
And just to recap, Kathleen and Mike, that was normal circumstances, 2 people under an emergency, 3. Is that what you all were saying?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that as well.
All right. So we'll do our best to, because if you see something, we can always edit it whenever you see it, but we'll do our best to try to capture that with the documents that go on for Monday. But thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it.
If there's nothing else, then stay cool. Today was a hot one. The central office had their air conditioner installed and it's up and running. So that's made everybody really, really happy. It was 89 yesterday, or upstairs in Wayne's office. I said, Wayne, I think you guys can all go now. Well, I think you can go work from wherever you need to at this point. But the air's on today. It's fully operational and brand new chiller, so we're good to go there. But thanks everybody for jumping on today. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for your
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.